The murky waters of the Amazon are teeming with fish. The surface ripples and then breaks. A head appears, followed by another, and a third. Soft barks carry across the water as the shapes slip beneath the surface once more. These are giant otters. At first glance they seem almost familiar, playful, almost dog-like. But beneath that surface lies something very different. Because giant otters are not just larger versions of their smaller relatives. They are the apex predators of these rivers, highly social, highly vocal, and among the most coordinated hunters in the animal kingdom. In the waterways of South America, they are known by another name, El Lobo de Rio, the river wolf. The giant otter belongs to the mustelids, a family better known for animals like ferrets and weasels. But this is one of the most diverse carnivore families on Earth, ranging from the fierce wolverine to striped badgers to the semi-aquatic otters. Despite that diversity, they share a defining trait: powerful anal scent glands. These produce strong odors used to mark territory and communicate with other individuals. Only one mustelid lacks this feature, the sea otter, because, as a fully aquatic animal, it can't mark territory on an ever-shifting ocean. Among mustelids, otters stand apart, and for one simple reason: they took to the water. All 14 species belong to the subfamily Lutrinae. Often seen as cute and playful, otters are actually highly specialized aquatic predators. They have powerful webbed feet that drive them through the water, and they can hold their breath for up to 8 minutes. When they dive, they seal their ears and nostrils completely to keep water out. These adaptations are so extreme that, as recently as the 1980s, some researchers thought sea otters might actually be a type of seal. Today, genetics tells a different story, placing them firmly within the mustelids. It's a classic case of convergent evolution, different lineages arriving at similar solutions to life underwater. Within Lutrinae, the giant otter, Pteronura brasiliensis, split off first. This might seem surprising at a glance. The sea otter, for example, may appear more unusual, but giant otters behave very differently from most other otters. So, despite looking fairly typical in body shape, they are actually the most distantly related of all living otters. Next are the New World river otters in the genus Lontra, stretching from northern Canada all the way down to southern Argentina and Chile. They were once grouped with Eurasian otters due to their similar appearance and behavior, but are now recognized as a distinct lineage. The next two species have a somewhat uncertain placement on the family tree. The sea otter, found along coastlines of the Atlantic Ocean, and the spot-necked otter of sub-Saharan Africa. Both are more closely related to the remaining otters than any of the American species, but their exact placement is still unresolved. The Eurasian otters in Lutra may only have 2 living species, but many extinct ones are known. Otters are thought to have evolved in Eurasia before later spreading to the Americas, perhaps explaining their extensive fossil record. The remaining 4 species are in their own clade. This includes the smooth-coated otter in its own genus, Lutrigale, and the clawless otters in Aonix, found throughout Southeast Asia and Africa. What unites all of these lineages is simple: a life tied to the water. All otters rely on it for hunting and movement, but to very different degrees. Sea otters almost never leave it, while the Asian small-clawed otter spends far more time on land, feeding on a wide variety of prey, everything from rats to worms to fish. It is within that group the giant otter is firmly placed. Perhaps the most distantly related of all otters, but still unmistakably an otter. As the name suggests, giant otters are large. Fully grown, they can reach around 1.8 meters, or just shy of 6 feet, about as long as most people are tall. That makes them the largest species of otter. Surprisingly though, they aren't the heaviest. That distinction goes to the sea otter, with its denser fur and stockier build. That size comes with clear advantages. Giant otters are powerful enough to fend off jaguars, and have been recorded hunting and killing young crocodilians. In their environment, they sit near the top of the food chain, apex predators of South America's freshwater rivers. Fish make up the bulk of their diet, but they are far from limited to it. When needed, they will also take crustaceans, snakes, and even small caimans and anacondas. But size alone isn't what makes them such effective aquatic hunters. Their entire body is built for life in the water. Long, streamlined, and highly flexible, giant otters can twist and turn quickly when pursuing prey. Their tail plays a crucial role here. In fact, their genus name, Pteronura, means winged tail, a reference to its shape. The tail is flattened and muscular, acting like a powerful propeller that helps drive them through the water, and a rudder to steer with precision. Despite spending so much of their time submerged, their fur remains one of their most important adaptations. Giant otters actually have the shortest fur of any otter species, but it is still incredibly dense. So dense, in fact, that the water never reaches the skin. This works through layering. The outer coat is made up of guard hairs, which trap a layer of air against the body. Beneath that, the inner fur stays completely dry, providing insulation even during long periods in the water. To hunt effectively in often murky rivers, giant otters rely heavily on their senses. Their whiskers are highly sensitive, capable of detecting subtle changes in water pressure and movement, allowing them to track prey even when visibility is poor. But, unlike many other otters, they don't rely on darkness. Most otter species are at least partly nocturnal, and their vision can be relatively limited. Giant otters, however, are active during the day. Observations suggest they can spot movement from considerable distances, even noticing humans long before they get close. Though this is still an area where more research is needed. But giant otters don't just adapt to their environment, they also shape it. Along riverbanks, groups create dens, clear vegetation, and establish communal latrine sites. Over time, this activity can reshape the local landscape, altering the structure of riverbanks and creating spaces used repeatedly by the group. As apex predators, their influence extends even further. By feeding primarily on fish, giant otters help regulate fish populations and can influence the balance of aquatic communities. In this way, their presence, or absence, can have cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. Taken together, giant otters are more than just inhabitants of these rivers. They are ecosystem engineers, playing an active role in shaping the environments on which they depend. But perhaps the most defining feature of giant otters isn't how they shape their environment, it's how they live within it. Most otters are solitary, spending much of their time hunting or living alone, or occasionally forming mated pairs. Giant otters are a clear exception. Instead of living alone, they form extended family groups with up to 20 members, though most groups are smaller, typically around 3 to 8 individuals. At the center of each group is a dominant breeding pair. Around them is the rest of the family, all working together, helping to raise young, defend territory, and secure food. Group members don't just hunt together, they also help care for the pups, babysitting, bringing food, and protecting them as they grow. And yes, there is a term for a group of otters, a romp. Giant otters may be a good descriptive name, but the Spanish name I mentioned earlier may be even more fitting. Lobo de Rio, river wolf. This comparison isn't just poetic. Their social structure closely mirrors what many people imagine when they think of wolf packs, a central breeding pair surrounded by their extended family, all contributing to the success of the group. That comparison becomes even clearer when looking at how they hunt. Giant otters can feed alone, sometimes simply benefiting from others hunting nearby, but they can also take this much further. There are observations of coordinated hunting, where groups work together to target larger, more dangerous prey. In these situations, they may mob animals like caimans or anacondas, overwhelming them through cooperation. This cooperation extends beyond hunting. It also plays a crucial role in defense. Jaguars are one of the few predators capable of killing an adult giant otter, but they can't deal with a group. There are multiple observations of entire romps harassing a jaguar, driving it away from their territory. And it is territory that underpins their entire system. Each group maintains and defends a shared stretch of river, complete with den sites and communal latrines. These spaces are not just living areas, but the foundation of the group's survival, providing access to food, shelter, and safety. Giant otters are not the only social otters. At the opposite end of the scale, the smallest species of otter, the Asian small-clawed otter, also lives in groups. This appears like an evolutionary oddity. Both the smallest and largest otters form cooperative groups, while those in between don't. But what seems mysterious could, in fact, be driven more by ecology than evolution. Otters are socially flexible. Even in more solitary species, they can occasionally congregate in areas where resources are abundant. Group living assists with rearing pups, hunting larger prey, and protection from predators. But it also requires more resources to sustain. Both giant and Asian small-clawed otters feed in highly productive areas. Giant otters specialized in floodplain systems that teem with prey, while Asian small-clawed otters are generalist foragers, feeding on a wide range of prey, including insects that replenish quickly. In both cases, these conditions make cooperation not just possible, but advantageous. Living in such tight-knit groups means individuals need to recognize one another. In giant otters, this is made easier by a unique physical trait. Each individual has a distinct pattern of cream markings on its throat. These markings act almost like fingerprints, allowing both other otters and researchers to identify individuals at a glance. But living in such tightly bonded groups requires more than just cooperation. It demands constant communication. And giant otters are anything but quiet. In fact, they are among the most vocal of all otter species, producing a wide range of sounds to coordinate their activities and maintain group cohesion. These vocalizations serve many functions. Soft contact calls help individuals keep track of one another as they move through dense vegetation or murky water. Louder calls can signal alarm, alerting the group to the presence of predators or rival otters. During tense encounters, these calls can escalate into sharp, aggressive vocalizations, reinforcing their collective defense. This constant exchange allows the group to function as a single unit. Whether traveling, hunting, or defending territory, individuals remain aware of one another, adjusting their behavior in real time. But communication alone is only part of the picture. Underlying this coordination is a question of cognition. How well do giant otters understand one another? And how effectively can they work together? One way researchers explore this is through cooperative problem-solving tasks. In one study, giant otters were presented with a cooperative problem. Two individuals had to pull on opposite ends of a rope at the same time to access food. If one pulled alone, the system failed. Success required coordination. Both giant otters and Asian small-clawed otters were able to solve this task, at least when the timing was simple. These results are striking. Cooperative problem-solving has been studied most heavily in primates and birds, and giant otters perform at a broadly similar level when conditions are not too demanding. In the wild, of course, cooperation doesn't take the form of ropes and platforms, but the same principles apply. Hunting, defending territory, and raising young all require individuals to act together, often in fast-moving and unpredictable situations. Exactly how deeply giant otters understand one another's intentions remains an open question, but what is clear is that their social lives demand a level of coordination and the cognitive ability to support it that goes far beyond what is typically expected of a mustelid. Giant otters are native to the great river systems of South America, once ranging across the vast Amazon and Orinoco basins, from Paraguay to Colombia. But today, that range is only a shadow of what it once was. Populations have disappeared from over 80% of their historical distribution, with their main strongholds now restricted to the remote rivers of Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana in the northeast of the continent. Giant otters have been listed as endangered by the IUCN since the 1990s. This status is the result of a combination of threats, both historical and ongoing. For much of the 20th century, the greatest threat was hunting. This was not unique to giant otters. Otters worldwide have been harvested for their pelts for centuries. But for giant otters, exploitation intensified dramatically during the mid-1900s. At its peak in the 1960s, between 1 and 3,000 giant otter pelts were taken every year from Amazonian Brazil alone. The impact was devastating. In some regions, populations were almost entirely wiped out, and by 1971, only 12 individuals were recorded in parts of Amazonian Brazil. Giant otters were likely spared from extinction largely due to international protections introduced in 1973 with the creation of CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. This agreement regulates the global trade of threatened species. Giant otters are listed under Appendix 1, the highest level of protection, effectively banning commercial trade in their pelts without special permits. Permits that are rarely granted for such an endangered species. While hunting pressure has since declined, new threats have taken its place. Today, habitat destruction and degradation are the primary challenges facing giant otters. Much of their range overlaps with some of the most rapidly changing landscapes on Earth. Deforestation, agriculture, and infrastructure development are reshaping river systems across the Amazon and surrounding regions. Forest loss along riverbanks removes critical den sites, while increased human activity brings disturbance to areas that were once remote and undisturbed. At the same time, the rivers themselves are changing. One of the most significant threats comes from gold mining. Across parts of the Amazon, mining operations release mercury into waterways, a toxic substance that accumulates in fish. As specialist fish predators, giant otters are particularly vulnerable to this kind of contamination, with toxins building up through the food chain, a process known as biomagnification. Over time, this can affect their health, reproduction, and survival. Fishing pressure is another growing issue. In many areas, giant otters now compete directly with people for the same food resources. This can reduce the availability of prey, but it can also lead to conflict. Otters are sometimes viewed as competitors or pests, and may be harassed or killed as a result. Individually, these pressures are significant, but perhaps the greatest threat comes from their combined effect, fragmentation. As rivers are altered and habitats broken apart, giant otter populations become increasingly isolated. And for a species that depends so heavily on cooperation, this presents a unique challenge. Giant otters do not simply exist as individuals. They function as cohesive family groups. When habitat is fragmented, it is not just numbers that are lost, but entire social units. Small, isolated groups may struggle to find mates, defend territory, or raise young successfully. Over time, this can lead to localized extinctions, even in areas where some suitable habitat remains. Despite these challenges, there are signs of hope. In protected areas, such as the Pantanal and parts of the Guianas, giant otter populations remain stable, and in some cases, are even recovering. Their future depends on preserving connected river systems, protecting water quality, and reducing conflict with people. For a species built on cooperation, survival depends not just on individual protection, but on maintaining the complex social structures that define them. And the loss of giant otters is not just the loss of a single species. Earlier, we saw how giant otters actively shape their environment, digging dens, clearing riverbanks, and influencing fish populations as apex predators. When they disappear, these roles are lost. Riverbanks change, ecosystems shift, and the balance of aquatic communities begin to unravel. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the giant otter. If you're interested in the research behind this episode, you can find a document with image credits and sources in the description below. These videos take a great deal of time and research to produce. They will always remain free to watch. But if you would like to support the channel and gain access to new videos a little earlier, you can find a link to my Patreon below as well. And to everyone who already supports the channel, thank you. Your support genuinely helps make these videos possible. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much to discover about the world's rare and remarkable species. And the more we understand, the better our chances of protecting them. Thanks for watching.